So the president's announcement on socio-economic relief measures has offered much hope for millions of South Africans. 500 billion is no small feat. Let's talk about the latest market and economic reaction to this announcement. We head to the business desk where Arabile Gumede is standing by. Arabile, a very good morning to you. Following the announcement yesterday by the president, how have the markets reacted?
Yeah, it certainly hasn't been a muted response per se, but one thing we need to take into consideration here is that it won't have an immediate impact on things like the local currency, which still hovers close to that 19 Rand mark against the US dollar. So unfortunately, in that regard, we are still a little bit hurt as well then. Things like bond markets have certainly felt the impact and realized that South Africa is making headway when it comes to just trying to provide some sense of stimulus. So markets are reacting, but it is going to be muted for now until these things begin to make a play into the market. Look, 500 billion Rand, as you said there, Desiree, is certainly no small feat. As the president put it, it is 10% of South Africa's GDP, or the value of South Africa as a total economy. Now, I thought I should put this in comparison to the rest of the world and consider how other economies have perhaps shaped up when it comes to how much they've put forward for stimulus efforts in the fight against COVID-19. The likes of Spain have put together 1% of their GDP. The likes of Italy around 1.8% of their GDP as well. Then the likes of Brazil beginning to inch up ever so slightly, around 6.9% then of GDP as well. Primarily, South Africa has put in a stimulus package to the value of the GDP that is really, really massive. Compared to other countries, the big juggernauts that really surpass us are the likes of Japan and the United States. The United States giving in a $2.3 trillion package there, and that is only 11% of their GDP. So understand the value of what we've actually put forward here. Japan also putting together a plan that equates to 20%, or should I say, of their GDP. So it really does tell you that South Africa has put in something that is absolutely massive in this context.
But of course, we can't afford the entire 10%, so 130 billion of current budget being reprioritized, but the rest coming from funding.
Yeah, look, it certainly will come from all those elements. And actually, just getting a little bit more with regards to that, we're getting 130 billion, as you said, from a budget reprioritization. We are expected to get 70 billion in the form of tax breaks. So that doesn't mean we necessarily have to pay out money per se. It just means we won't be receiving that money with regards to taxes, which does hurt in the big scheme of things, but it keeps people alive. Because if you keep those businesses running, it does mean that at a later stage, you'll be able to still collect money from them. And of course, we've had the deferrals when it comes to tax payments, even on PAYE, meaning that companies who are meant to pay their 100% tax portion can now delay 35% of their tax for a later stage. It does mean, though, that the country will still get that tax. It just is going to be received into the fiscus at a later stage. In terms of the other money, we have 40 billion, which will come from the UIF as well then, and then the 200 billion, which comes in the form of loan guarantees, which again isn't necessarily exact money. It just means that National Treasury and the Prudential Authority, which is the South African Reserve Bank, have put together a plan in that 200 billion Rand loan guarantee that says if you are a business that makes less than 300 million Rand an annum, you can apply for this and the bank will be then able to pay off your other expenses. And that loan means that you can pay it back interest-free over the longest time as well. So it is quite a big deal, and really it's not that much that is needed in terms of funding from the 500 billion. So understand that there are other ways in which we're trying to formulate and put this money together.
Arabile, that relief for taxpayers who are contributing to the Solidarity Fund, how's this going to work?
Yeah, so ultimately the big question around that is just how do you know who's made this donation, who hasn't? So once you make the donation, you need to fill out quite a bit of your details then with regards to the Solidarity Fund and really explain what it is you're putting through, how much you have put through the proof of payment as well. And that then will be kept on record. And then at a later stage, when your taxes are then measured, you will then be looked at and be told you have that 10% a discount when it comes to your taxes. So one thing to realize in the long run, Desiree, unfortunately, is that tax collection is bound to be smaller. But if you keep the economy going for a sustainably long period of time, that means that you can get back all that money, hopefully at a later stage. Unfortunately, though, it does mean that 2020 and 2021 as two impactful financial years is certainly going to be scrapped for the foreseeable future, and we won't be able to make too much out of it economically.
The president announcing that we will see a new economy founded on fairness, empowerment, justice and equality. Our economy will never be the same again, will it?
Yeah, look, it definitely won't be. And you know what, in some respects, one may say thank you for that, because, and this is just a personal opinion now, Desiree, it might just be the great equalizer. Even though our needs and the extent of our needs at this point in time are different, we're experiencing similar problems as a country, which means that we're certainly going to try to find solutions that will not just aid one's self, but try to solve problems for the many. As you can tell, the 350 rand that will be given to people who are unemployed, that's a big deal in itself. Now we're talking about people who even before the crisis were facing a dire situation, and now even amidst the crisis we're trying to help them as well for a period of around 6 months. So it does tell you that the economy is going to have to find another way. We're going to have to be very creative and very innovative in how we push forward. The structural reforms that South Africa has needed for quite some time, that the ratings agencies have spoken about, that we needed to change how we fund SOEs, how we manage those SOEs as well, and just how much we get out of growth, the infrastructure funding as well, and how we develop the country. All of those things that we've continuously spoken about and had warnings about from multilateral organizations, including the ratings agencies, we now have the green light for. President Cyril Ramaphosa last night also stating perfectly that we must then put in place those structural reforms in order for the economy to grow and get back on track. So that does hand the baton over then to Finance Minister Tito Mboweni, and hopefully he will be able to deliver an address very soon detailing just what we need, how we're going to do it, and the fact that we're going to do it immediately.
Let's talk a bit about the misunderstanding about the funding space, the funding conditions, especially the IMF. I'm going to read you two tweets which are contradictory as you prepare your answer there. Arabile Gumede, who is an ANC councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay, says, President Ramaphosa spoke so well and outlined a clear plan of action for our country. He's supported, full stop. My only request to the president is to order the governor of our Reserve Bank to print the 500 billion instead of borrowing from the IMF, the World Bank and other financial corporations. Now, I'll try and find another tweet which comes from Mbazima Shilowa. He's the former premier of Gauteng. Let me see. I can't find it now, but the essence of the tweet is that South Africa is a member of the IMF and uses taxpayer money to pay its IMF fees annually. And we shouldn't forget that bit.
Yeah, so many parts to this conversation actually then, Desiree. If we consider the first part, which is really, as you made note of there, that final point that we do use our taxes to actually fund the IMF, no matter how small, why would you not want to take that opportunity to, at a stage like this, then use it to the benefit of your own country's economy? Let's remember, it's less onerous. What does that mean? You don't need a structural reform program. You don't need an economy that is headed in a particular direction in terms of growth to get the loan from the IMF or the World Bank at a stage like this. You don't need the plans that we should be having in place anyway to get the kind of funding we need to fight COVID-19. What you need is the crisis, and the crisis is here. So we are able to get it at much, much lower rates. And of course, considering that South Africa is sitting with a full house of junk ratings from the credit ratings agencies, this is our best bet in terms of lending. Yes, we'll ultimately need to pay it back, but it will be less onerous and we'll be able to do it at a structured and more convenient pace for the country. So that is the first port of call. Now, in terms of the printing of money, yes, we got the response from the South African Reserve Bank Governor, Mr. Lesetja Kganyago, saying that no, we will not be printing out more money. And here's the primary reason. In his words, he says, if you have too much money chasing too few goods, you will have an economy that is really in trouble. What does that mean? Ultimately, you print the 500 billion rand and you plow it back into South Africa's economy. Let's remember, though, that some of this money is not necessarily hard cash that actually gets thrown at certain things. Things like guarantees aren't necessarily cash that is being thrown out at a point like this, right? So it's not as if that money will just be coming out as well. But what it means, though, as well, Desiree, is that if you have that money coming out and just being printed, we will have then an excess of money sitting in the country. Ultimately, when you have too much money, that means you can afford a lot more things, which means that pushes up the price of inflation. And unfortunately, according to their mandate, if inflation rises too much, then they actually have to increase interest rates. I'm sorry, I just thought that we just dropped interest rates by 200 basis points. Why would we want to go backwards? It does not help the situation. So I think a little bit more education, yes, by the media and ourselves is needed at a time like this, but certainly a lot more information driven towards the discussion is needed.
Arabile, just to end off our conversation, just on a light-hearted note, I think it must be a very exciting time for economic students who usually would have to just deal with the theory of stimulus packages, of an injection of money into the economy and the type of money that is being used. And now they're experiencing it in real time.
Yeah. Look, it certainly is the most educational time to be as a country, right? Things are certainly happening and they're all happening so quickly. There's news everywhere. There's understanding the stimulus packages, and the IMF actually has a page that talks about the stimulus responses by each country and tells you exactly why they did what they did and how much they're doing and to which sectors they're plowing that into. That is an absolutely clear example. I urge every student of economics, everybody who is interested in economics, to really go onto that page and find out exactly how they're treating this. This was not a financial crisis. This was a health crisis that unfortunately needs economic and fiscal and financial assistance in order to get through it. So it does tell you a lot about the times we're in then, Desiree. It's unprecedented, but look, we certainly are going to get through it. All we need to do is ensure that we follow social distancing measures, even when the lockdown recedes ever so slightly, sector by sector. It does mean that South Africa, please, we need to be a whole lot more careful and stay safe.
Thanks you so much for that reminder. We don't talk about it much anymore, the protocols of the lockdown. Arabile, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Let's take a break. You're watching The Agenda.